He woke before dawn. The sky was the color of cold metal, and the coffee tasted like the last thing he could afford. His suit, pressed once too often, hung on a bent wire hanger by the window. Outside, a paperboy's bicycle chain clicked like a metronome for failure. But something was different that morning. Something moved, not in the world, in him. If you want the work to speak, press like. It tells the world you're listening. That man was Jim Rohn, years before the world called him wise, before the seminars, before the stage lights, before he ever said, "Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better." Back then, he was broke, working at Sears, trying to pay rent and feed a dream that refused to die. And that morning, that one ordinary morning, that would turn into the beginning of everything. He looked at the clock, 6:42 a.m., late for work, again. And he laughed quietly, because time was no longer his master. He remembered something his mentor, Mr. Schoaf, had told him only days before. "Jim, if you want to change your life, start by changing your morning." That sentence had burned in him like a slow fire. So that day, instead of rushing out, Jim took a notebook. He wrote one line, "Where am I going?" And for the first time, he didn't have an answer. What do you do when you realize you've been living by accident? When the mirror shows effort, but not progress? He closed his eyes. He could still hear his father's voice. "Just work hard, son." And he had. But hard work without purpose is like rowing a boat with no oar. So Jim did something strange. He stopped. He took the day off, not for rest, but for redirection. He walked the streets of his small Idaho town, hands in pockets, wind against his face, and he started to count, not money, but moments lost. Every corner reminded him of a promise unkept. Every shop window reflected a version of himself he'd outgrown. But wait. Sometimes life doesn't whisper, it interrupts. Across the street, he saw a man he recognized, Earl Schoaf, the entrepreneur who had once spoken at a local meeting. Polished shoes, calm smile, effortless presence. Jim crossed over, pulse quick. "Mr. Schoaf, I heard you speak once," he said. "I can't get your words out of my mind." Schoaf smiled. "Then maybe they were meant for you." That single conversation turned into hours. Schoaf didn't talk about money first. He talked about character, about becoming more so you could earn more. "Success," Schoaf said, "isn't something you pursue. It's something you attract by the person you become." Those words landed like thunder in a quiet valley. He went home that night a different man, but he didn't yet know it. That next morning, the morning, began it all. He woke at 4:30, no alarm, just purpose. He made coffee, sat down, opened his notebook again, and under yesterday's question, he wrote his first answer, "I'm going somewhere better." And for the first time, his handwriting didn't shake. He listed what he would read, whom he would learn from, what he would no longer tolerate. 3 columns, 3 promises, 3 seeds that would become his philosophy. Work hard, work smart, work again. That morning changed everything because he finally met himself. He stopped waiting for luck to find him and decided to find discipline instead. And so began a pattern that would define his life. Morning reflection, daily study, evening review, the simple disciplines, repeated daily, that lead to a revolution of identity. If you're watching this and something inside you stirs, that's the same seed waking up. Comment below, "I will build." Let the world know you're starting. Now here's the truth Jim would tell you if he could sit across from you now. You don't need a new world, you need a new morning. He used to say, "Discipline weighs ounces, regret weighs tons." So he lifted ounces, one morning at a time, until his life became a monument to consistency. But success doesn't come without silence before the applause. Before he ever stood on a stage, there was another moment, a test that nearly broke him, and it began the very next morning. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with one person who's ready to wake up their purpose. Because like Jim said, it all begins one morning at a time. The sun rose slower that day, as if the sky itself was testing his patience. The coffee was bitter, the air heavy, and on the table lay the note that would decide everything. Rent due today. He looked at it, folded once, twice, and whispered, "Today, we find out if I meant what I wrote." If you've ever made a promise to yourself and felt it shake in the morning light, press like. It means you still care. He had no savings, no secret plan, only a few coins and a notebook filled with hope. That's where real change begins, not in comfort, but in clarity. So he put on his jacket, the same one he'd worn for 3 years, and walked out the door, into a morning colder than his breath. Every step whispered, "Are you serious this time?" He remembers how he underlined the same sentence for months. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. But he hadn't believed it. Not yet. That morning, he decided belief would no longer be a luxury. It would be a discipline. Because belief isn't emotion, it's training. By noon, his pockets were empty. Rent unpaid. Failure near. But something inside had changed. He sat on a park bench listening to children's laughter in the distance and realized he was no longer afraid of being broke. He feared something worse, staying the same. That realization, that tiny rebellion against stagnation, was his second awakening. He opened his notebook again, wrote one sentence in bold strokes. The pain of discipline is lighter than the pain of regret. He circled it twice, then smiled, the first genuine smile in months. Later that week, he met with Mr. Schoaf again. Schoaf looked him over and said, "Jim, you look different." Jim replied, "I decided to start before I'm ready." Schoaf nodded. "Good, because you'll never feel ready." Then came the test. Schoaf invited Jim to join his team, not as a worker, but as a student in motion. He said, "We rise by the same stairs we build." For months, Jim traveled, learned, failed, and got back up. But every journey comes with a price, and one night, that price came due. He was in a small motel outside Sacramento, cold, hungry, and alone. Bills stacked on the dresser like silent critics. He could have quit. Most do. But he remembered that morning, the one where he promised himself he'd go somewhere better. He took out the notebook and whispered, "Don't wish it were easier, Jim. Wish you were better." That line, born in pain, would one day echo in auditoriums around the world. But tonight, it was just him, a notebook, and a decision. And here's where the story bends. The very thing that almost broke him became the furnace that forged him. He began writing daily lessons, not for fame, not for money, for survival of the mind. Each page was a conversation between who he was and who he could be. He was rewriting his own DNA through ink and habit. Comment below, "I will not quit," because somewhere between fear and faith, that's where transformation hides. Weeks passed, money still tight, Schoaf's mentorship deepening. Jim began speaking, first to 3 people in a living room, then 10, then 50. He didn't know it then, but he was planting seeds that would feed millions. Each word spoken was bought with a morning of struggle. Then came the letter, an invitation, a request to speak at a regional sales meeting, his first real stage. He stood in front of the mirror the night before, tie trembling in his hands, and said quietly, "Tomorrow, I speak as who I've become, not who I was." He didn't know the crowd would rise that day. He didn't know history was listening. He only knew it all began one morning when he decided to change. If you believe every person deserves their turning point, share this video, because the next morning that changes everything could be yours. The morning was quiet, too quiet for what was coming. The hotel room smelled faintly of paper, ink, and courage. Jim adjusted his tie once more, then looked out the window at the rising sun. It had been years since that first notebook. Years since coffee tasted like hope and fear in the same cup. Today he would speak to 5,000 people, but he whispered the same words he had on that very first day. "I'm going somewhere better." If you've ever chased a dream that once seemed impossible, press like. It tells the story you're still writing. He glanced at his notes, lines of philosophy shaped by years of hunger, discipline, and faith. Each sentence was carved from 1,000 mornings of becoming. The room was still, his breath calm. He smiled, because he finally understood what success really meant. Not applause, not wealth, but the quiet mastery of oneself. That morning before stepping on stage, he called his mother. He told her, "You won't believe how many people came to listen." She laughed softly. "You always had something to say, Jimmy. You just needed to learn how to say it." He paused. That hit him deep. Because the truth was, he hadn't just learned to speak. He had learned to listen, to himself, to others, to life whispering between the lines. He walked backstage. The murmur of the crowd was thunder in disguise. He could feel it. 5,000 lives waiting to be changed by words born from pain. And he thought back to that young man counting coins in a coffee shop. He smiled again, because he realized nothing had changed except him. He was still showing up early, still writing, still learning. Only now, the world had finally caught up to his mornings. When he stepped onto the stage, he didn't raise his hands. He simply looked around, quiet, measured, present. Then he began, "Success is not to be pursued. It is to be attracted by the person you become." And the room went still. The silence was sacred, because in that moment, every listener felt what Jim had lived. He continued, voice low but firm, "If you will change, everything will change for you. You don't have to change the world, just change yourself." And somewhere in the back row, a young man, broke, uncertain, searching, took notes, just like Jim once did. That's how legacy begins. Not with a crowd, but with one listener ready to rise. After the talk, someone asked him, "Mr. Rohn, what was the hardest part of your journey?" He smiled, that slow, knowing smile, and said, "The mornings no one saw, the mornings where the bed felt heavy, the mornings where the notebook was empty, the mornings where success was invisible, but discipline was not." He leaned forward and whispered, "We become successful long before the world notices. We become it when no one's watching." And that line, that truth, would echo through generations of speakers, leaders, and dreamers, because Jim didn't teach success. He taught self-respect through effort. My mornings begin now. Let the world know your change has started. Later in life, Jim often said, "We must all suffer one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret." But those who knew him say, his mornings no longer carried pain, only purpose. He'd sit by the window, same golden light, same gentle routine, and smile, because what began as survival had become service. He wrote one final note before his last seminar: "If my words outlive me, let them remind you, success is predictable if you are consistent." That was the last morning he wrote before the world called him legendary. And even now, somewhere, another young person wakes before dawn, pours their first cup of coffee, and opens a notebook. And maybe, just maybe, the ink glows gold because Jim once showed them how to begin. If this story awakened something in you, subscribe, not to a channel, but to your own potential. Share this with someone who's standing at their first morning of change. Because like Jim Rohn proved, a new life doesn't start someday. It starts this morning.